Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about Hollywood using existing IP as a skin suit for their own fan fictions. A lot of times writers in Hollywood taking an existing IP, making extensive changes to it to the place where it no longer resembles the source material.
So pretty much everything from the 80s that they've, zombified of late.
Pretty much, right? This is coming from Branden Sanderson, author Branden Sanderson, who talked about his own frustration getting his stuff through the Hollywood system. And we've seen lots of changes to, especially books. Mm-hmm. Books get bastardized. Now, in the very rare case, sometimes the movie is better than the book. It doesn't happen very often. I think Stardust.
Stardust, we can agree,
is one of the few examples where it's actually better. Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, so many of these, books that have been, kind of the IP has been there to get your foot in the door. Really, that's the only reason they're using it, and then they shoehorn in their own story. And
well, they've been doing that. They've always made changes, but as of late, and it's more, I think, franchises. We see it more with franchises that existed like the 80s and stuff like that. They're rebooting. That they come in and they call it that, but then they make it something completely different. Books don't usually get treated as badly as the shows do.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that because I mean this is one of the things that really still chaps are behind to this day is She-Ra, which was basically a skin suit of the original show. Clearly it was then Noelle Stevenson and
now it's Andy Stevenson,
Andy Stevenson, whatever. Clearly it was a fan fiction. Clearly it was an original story, and then they just took the She-Ra IP and just kind of slathered it on to be able to sell that pitch. Or they had another idea that they wanted to do. They would give you millions of dollars for She-Ra, but they're not going to greenlight, Super Sword Scissor Sisters or whatever the hell you want to do. So you just take She-Ra, turn it into the story you want to turn it into. And that does explain in part why a lot of these reboots or reimaginings veer so far from the source material. Because it's not because the Hollywood person is a fan of the source material. In a lot of cases, they wanted to tell their own story. They couldn't do it. It didn't have the brand recognition. So they just turned that existing IP into their own fan.
I think it's called, there's a demand for those shows. There was a demand, so they ruined them for those type of things, those kind of type of projects. And they want to bring them back. But the people that are in charge now are mad because when they were younger, they didn't get to go to prom with their girlfriend or boyfriend. So now they have to, make themselves their own OC, insert yourselves into the, whatever they're rebooting and make it for them and their friends. That's what they're doing. They're making it for them and their friends, and they call it modern audience. That's what it is with prom. Always with prom.
And I think with a lot of these, cartoons in particular, they, cartoon shows in particular, they basically had the studios hoodwinked into believing they were bankrolling children's entertainment, and it really wasn't for kids. And it definitely wasn't for the normie older audience, the Gen X audience, because they veer so far from the source material. So let's talk about this. Let's see what Branden Sanderson has to say about it. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. Guys, you'll get woohoo if you do.
Woohoo!
So this is coming from Phantom Pulse. John Trent found it, and I guess it was out on Reddit. So it was on.
I don't do Reddit. Sorry.
No. The Lord of the Rings meme subreddit back in October. Okay, so this has been a while now, and it's just kind of coming out. Sanderson shared an anecdote about how one of his lesser-known stories, Emperor's Soul, was optioned for a Hollywood project. After explaining how the writer for the project was the one who pitched it and eventually convinced the studio to option the rights, Sanderson revealed that when he eventually got his hands on the script, it was nothing like his novel and described it as one of the most bizarre experiences of my life.
I believe it. I mean, I'm glad we had some options, but luckily didn't go there much further. Didn't go to the script stage because I don't think I would have been okay with what we had come back to us.
Yeah, I don't think so either, because I think it would have been a very bastardized version. Well, here, like this is case in point. It says the character names were largely the same, though nothing that happened to them was remotely similar to the story. Emperor's Soul is a small-scale character drama that takes place largely in one room, with discussions of the nature of art between two characters who approach the idea differently. Well, that's not going to make for a very exciting Hollywood show, is it? So the screenplay detailed an expansive fantasy epic with a new love interest for the main character, a pirate captain. They globetrotted, they fought monsters, they explored a world largely unrelated to mine, save for a few words here and there. So they just wanted the name. It's a starter, right? It's like it's a starter pack. And look, studios do this. They basically option novels or option comics all the time, and that novel is not what the movie's going to be. They just like the basic concept, and or sometimes they will, and we can speak to experience about this, they will option stuff to take you out of play because they're working on something similar, and they don't want you to get in the way or pitch against them to another studio or whatever. So they take it off the table for 5 years by throwing some money at you.
Yep, pretty much.
Till they get theirs through. Or they like the basic idea, they just don't like the execution. And in some cases, Disney, in some cases, they'll actually option your stuff, take a kernel of what they like about your stuff, scrap the rest of it, and then attribute it to another writer, another project.
Oh, and then say you can't say anything about it because it's just coincidence.
Because you cash the check.
It's just coincidence.
It's just merely coincidence. Merely coincident. Yeah, that's yeah. Sanderson explained why the script was so different. Okay, so this is this his whole thing here? Okay, let's read his original here. Okay, so here I have a fun story. Early in my career, someone optioned the rights to make one of my story. Okay, we got there. The script came back, lots of changes. We did that. The screenplay detailed an expansive fantasy epic. We did that. Hollywood doesn't buy spec scripts, original ideas from screenwriters very often, and they never buy spec scripts that are epic fantasy. Those are too big, too expensive, and too daunting. They're the sorts of stories where the producers and executives need the proof of an established book series to justify the production.
Or an established series from a show or something else that still has a long-term fan base. It's not just a book thing. That's why we keep getting so many projects that are like reboots of things, but then they just completely ruin them. You know, with some stupid story that's nothing like it. And then if you don't like it, it's because you're a terrible person, not because they effed up.
So Sanderson says this writer never had a chance to tell his own epic fantasy story, though he wanted to. Instead, he found a popular-ish story that nobody had snatched up. And used it as a means to tell the story he wanted to tell because he'd never otherwise have a chance of getting it made.
Right.
And I think this is what we're seeing with Star Wars and Marvel too, because we're getting a lot of, people coming into this, and in a lot of cases they don't have a lot, credit or whatever. Like look at the Acolyte, Leslie Headland, whatever, but obviously wanted to tell.
But that was her own thing. It's just that she put it with Star Wars.
Well, she put it with Star Wars because she couldn't get through on her own. So the Acolyte became her fan fiction, her original creation about space witches or whatever. And then it's like, okay, fine, we'll make it a Star Wars. We'll make it fit in Star Wars so I can tell this lesbian romance I've always wanted in outer space. I've always wanted to tell.
That's not fair. She's a fan of all of them.
All of them. She likes all the movies. Which Star Wars you like? All of them. I like the one with the spaceships. I like the one with Spock. That's my favorite. That's my favorite. That's my favorite Star Wars movie. Yeah, it's the one with Spock. Anyway, Sanderson says, I'm convinced this is part of the issue with some of those adaptations. Screenwriters and directors are creative. They want to tell their own stories, but it's almost impossible to get those things made in fantasy unless you're a huge established name like Cameron. I'm not saying they all do this deliberately, as that screenwriter did for my work, but I think it's an unconscious influence. They want to tell their stories. This is the allowed method. So when given the chance at freedom, they go off the rails, and the execs don't know the genre or property well enough.
It's intentional.
It's intentional.
It's intentional. Make no mistake. It's intentional.
Yeah, no, I think it's intentional. I think this is exactly what happened with like Netflix She-Ra. I think this is what happens with a lot of these live action adaptations of anime or whatever. It's like, oh no, this is the story I wanted to tell. So we'll keep it similar enough. And then when the fans complain, they're the bad guys.
Well, I do think, though, sometimes it's the stupid mandates, too, because a lot of this also came to be around the time they were doing that stupid thing. Well, you would need so many things have to be, underrepresented minorities and all that crap. So I think Netflix, I don't even know if it was Andy Stevenson so much with the She-Ra, as it was at DreamWorks, as it was with because there was a Bible they found that was her original pitch Bible, and it was very similar to the show originally, and then it got completely changed into something else later. So I'm not sure if it's the studio thing. Like, I still think that when it came to the Masters of the Universe Revelation, I still think that the reason they made some of the choices they made, it was going to be the Tila show. I still think that was a mandate from the studio, from that was Netflix at the time. It was a mandate from them and not from necessarily Kevin Smith. I think he played within the parameters, which I think is why he tagged them in when he had such a shit fit with your post and tagged them in.
My understanding, talking to people, is that Smith was there basically for the geek cred, but he really didn't have a lot of influence on the show overall. That was the Mattel guys. That was Netflix and the Mattel guys.
Yeah, well, be careful what you say, because some little loser is going to start screaming at you.
No, I'm just saying that I don't know the full story, but that's my understanding, is that it was they basically got Kevin Smith because they're like, oh, nerds love Kevin Smith. We know Kevin Smith. He's a nerd, so yeah, we'll attach him to it. Let him make a dick joke, a Skeletor dick joke, because that's basically what he does, and then the rest of it is going to be Battle
I want the custom figure of Battle Boner Skeletor.
No, I don't want that. So see, the difference is in the 80s, Battle Boner Skeletor would have actually had an action feature where his Battle Boner popped to life with a push of a button, and then you'd see a little comic on the back about how that works. But then in the new line, he's going to have a detachable dick because it's too expensive to make the working mechanism. So
what did it shoot? Anyway, back to the stuff. So, but this is why Hollywood, it's basically about money. It's about being lazy. And like he said, if in his case, it's a little different because a writer wanted to rework his stuff. And that, that's just it. And that's what they do. They get hold of it. They get put on it. They were putting these Tumblr rights and all that on it. And they were trying to leverage the name recognition to tell their own story, which had nothing to do with it. And like you said, if you didn't like it, you were a bigot.
Yeah. It's interesting. They bring up Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, which once I watched it, I actually liked it. But I'm gonna be honest, it didn't really feel like D&D. I mean, it was an enjoyable movie, but it was a
normie movie. I think that
it was a normie movie. It was that's
what that happens too, because you have to meet the biggest common denominator, right? So a lot of times they take stuff and they change it to make it more palatable for the average audience.
Well, because I do remember this now, and this bit them in the ass hard. But the directors went around and said, hey, we kind of needed the D&D name to tell our story. They said to be able to do that kind of storytelling at the level you want to do it, do you feel you have to find a way into a franchise versus writing an original story? They said using existing IP greases the wheels. Any meeting we have with the studio head starts with, here's 4 things we own. Got any interest? To some extent, I think we use intellectual property as a bit of a costume to get ourselves in the door. We're still going to make the movie we want to make. It just makes it
middle fingers.
Yeah, right. It just makes it a bit easier to get it going if it has something that people are very familiar with.
Yeah, but here's where it's a piece of shit, though. It's a piece of shit because, one, it's disrespectful to the original source material and those who worked on it and all that. 2, it's disrespectful to the fans because the fans have supported this thing for decades and decades and decades. Looking at you, Shira. And all this other stuff. Hey, the Gem movie too. They supported it for decades. It's popular and still beloved now. Star Wars, all that, because of fans who supported it for decades. And then they have this attitude, we're just going to use it because they own it to get our door and tell our own story. And then they do that, and it's dog shit, and everybody hates it. And the old fans obviously hate it because it's nothing like the original. And then they say we're after a new audience, and the new audience you get is like a handful of like super highly triggered activist types, and then they spend all their time in the marketing for the show telling everyone if you hate it, you're a bigot. Because back then, people were like, oh, I don't want people to think I'm a bigot. Oh, I don't want, so you'd back off. But that shit doesn't fly anymore. I like to take kind of partial responsibility for that. It doesn't fly anymore because of people like us. So fuck off. Make up your own stuff. If you can't get in the door with your own stuff, then that's a you problem.
That is
go make your own stuff big first, and then go look for a deal. Just
there you go. All right.
Middle finger and a half. You can't see because the camera's not on.
See also Tolkien. See also Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna wrap it up.
Yes.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. We'll talk later.
Bye.